there was one question that was asked in a group page that's dedicated to Scream fans, and it showed all 12 killers throughout the course of 6 movies, and it asked something along the lines of which killer would you say you feel sorry for the most? And my simple answer is none of them, because they all, regardless of their motives, they were all psychotic, they were all murderous psychopaths who basically felt no remorse for the atrocities that they committed. And that was them being serial killers. I mean, of course, anybody who's a Scream fan, I mean, that's goes without saying. I mean, that's obvious. But then here comes another question, which is, do their motives make sense? Now, some motives I would say made a little bit more sense than others. Some of them were just purely like, okay, yeah, that's dumb. Others are like, okay, I could see that. That kind of makes sense, because they have other movies where, you know, people commit certain crimes out of whether it's acts of revenge or they were paid to do it or whatever the case may be. So who are the 12 killers? The 12 killers over the course of 6 movies are Billy, Stu, Mickey, Nancy, Roman, Charlie, Jill, Amber, Richie, Wayne, Ethan, and Quinn. Now, what are each of their motives? Well, let's see. Billy's motive was, so Billy Loomis was the main antagonist of the first film, with Stu Macher being the secondary antagonist. That was Billy's accomplice. Now, Billy's thing was about, so he was dating Sidney Prescott, who was obviously the protagonist, and to his claim, he went after Sidney because Sidney's mom supposedly had an affair with Billy's dad, which then caused Billy's dad and mom to divorce. And so that messed up Billy's family, and so he decides to go after Sidney for that. Now, the question is, does that make sense? I would say not really, because, I mean, number one, first of all, again, I know this is just a movie, but I like to talk about this just for fun. Number one, so to go after somebody's daughter because they messed up your life, I mean, I don't see that. I would say that leans a little bit more towards, nah, that doesn't make any sense. That just makes him a freaking psycho and he's out of his mind. Stu Macher's motive, I guess according to what he said, it's pure pressure because, well, he just was with Billy and he said, hey, you want to do this? And he just went along with it, and he killed some people, like he killed Kenny, the cameraman, and some other people there that were present in the movie. Now, that was the first movie. Now, the second movie, you had Mickey Altieri, who was a film student and another person who was obsessed with movies, along with Nancy Loomis, Billy's mother. Now, what was Mickey's motive? His motive was, I want to kill people and get caught on purpose and then blame it on the movies so I can make a point to say movies cause violence. Yeah, that's dumb. That's purely stupid. Like, hey, you're going to kill a bunch of people and risk going to prison. And then, of course, he ends up getting killed in the process anyway because all the killers end up dead. That's what happens with those movies, and that's what happens with most movies. They end up in dead or in prison, so it's like, doesn't make sense. Now, here's a motive that makes a little bit more sense. Nancy Loomis's motive, which is kind of obvious, is that she's seeking revenge against Sidney and Gail and anybody else who was involved in her son's murder. You know, she was going after them as an act of revenge. Okay, that's a little more understandable. You killed my son, so now I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill everybody around you. Makes sense. Still doesn't make her any less evil or that she's not, you know, responsible for criminality. Hey, at the end of the day, you're still a murderer. You're still evil. You still killed a dozen people. So, Scream 3, we get to Roman. Now this movie, unlike most of the other movies, this one only had the one killer, which was him. And he was Sidney's half-brother. Now, the reason why he went after Sidney was because he was distraught and upset and disappointed and depressed that the mother apparently abandoned him, and she went off to pursue Hollywood under a different name and basically just, as he said, shut me out of the cold forever, her own son. But still, you're going after Sidney for that. Like, how is Sidney responsible for that? I personally, and again, everything I'm saying right here, this is just my own opinion. This is just, again, how I feel about it. Now, if you think that Roman's motive made sense, I mean, feel free to talk about it in the comment section and let me know what you think. You might open me up to a new perspective. And same thing with Billy and Stu. So Roman's thing is very similar to Billy's. Like, hey, your mom did this, so I'm going to kill you. I would say a little more no. We get to Scream 4. We have Charlie and Jill. So Charlie Walker and Jill Roberts. And Jill Roberts is Sidney's cousin. And she wanted to kill Sidney out of envy and jealousy. Now, what does this mean? It means that, according to Jill, she said, you don't know how hard it was growing up in this family because you always got the fame and everything was always Sidney, Sidney, Sidney. You were always so special. And now I want to be the special one. Now, she hired Charlie to be her accomplice. Little did he know she was using him as a tool. So, of course, she ended up killing him. Now, Charlie, as far as his motive, he didn't necessarily have a motive. He just wanted to side with Jill, and he just kind of fell into the trap, and it just, all right. And also, he wanted to bring the Stab movies to reality. Now, to those of you who don't watch Scream, Stab is not a real movie. That's just a movie within a movie. It's a movie that's inside the Scream movies that actually parodies the Scream movies itself. So that's really just Scream kind of making fun of themselves in a way. So Charlie was a part of that. And so, okay, he ends up dead. Then Jill's dead because she gets killed by Sidney and them in the hospital. All right. I would say that Jill's motive somewhat made a little bit more sense than Billy's and Roman's, but not quite as much as Nancy's. Okay, at least Nancy's thing was legitimate. I'm doing this for revenge, to avenge my son. It's like, Jill, what are you doing? Killing Sidney is not, what? So she just wanted to be a star, and she couldn't do that with Sidney being in the way. Again, not as good, per se, as Nancy's motive, but better than some of the others. That was Scream 4. Now we get to Scream 5, and the killers are Amber and Richie. Now, Richie was Sam's boyfriend, and Amber was one of Tara's close friends. And she was in the friend group with Mindy and Chad and Wes and Liv and that whole group. Now, I think their motive made even less sense because their motive was the Stab movies were good in the beginning and they started to get worse and worse and worse. So we're going to make our own Stab movie come to life. And we're going to use Sam as our main target because she's the daughter of Billy Loomis, who was the antagonist of not only the actual first film, but also in the first Stab movie, played by Luke Wilson. Okay? Doesn't make any sense, but these are just crazy movie-obsessed nerds who, whiny snowflake people who just said, hey, these movies suck. Let's do a movie of our own, and let's use Billy Loomis' daughter to... So, craziness. Crazy, crazy. That was the 5th movie. And then the 6th movie, which I think makes a little bit more sense as far as the motives. In the 6th movie, you have a family of killers. This is a first for Scream. You have Wayne with his son and daughter, Ethan and Quinn. Now, what's their motive? Their motive is to seek revenge against Sam and her friends because they killed Richie in the previous film, which is a throwback, an obvious throwback to when Nancy was trying to get revenge for Billy. So this actually makes a little bit more sense. And of course, they all end up dead. Now, again, not to say none of them are evil. They all are. But I just wanted to throw that out there just as, just to talk about my own opinion as far as which motives made sense and which ones didn't. So overall, I would say the motives that made the most sense were Wayne, Ethan, and Quinn, and Nancy. Jill is a half and half, and I would argue she was probably the most psychotic and the craziest out of all the ghost faces. That's just what I would argue. And then the ones that made next to no sense were Mickey, Richie, Amber, Stu, Billy. I would say especially Richie, Amber, and Mickey. Their motives made the least sense. And then you kind of had, again, Wayne, Ethan, and Quinn, and Nancy. Their motives made the most sense. Jill's was kind of in the middle. So what do you think? Which motives made the most sense to you and which ones made the least sense to you?